KRH in Houston. We're having some difficulty in the quality of the air-to-ground communications on the Apollo-Soyuz mission and their press conference right now. We're trying to get it corrected. What you're hearing is in the background. We will get it corrected, though, very shortly, and we'll continue to listen.
David, it's pretty hard to pick up. Once again, this is the problem that we have been facing through much of the last few days, and that is the communications link. He's saying that he thinks that for the benefit of all mankind, such flights would be a benefit to all persons on Earth. It seems to me that in time, space will become the place where we can produce new materials. And we will be able to, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last two words, David. There's quite a bit of static on the Soviet line. Thank you, Valery. Questions are being asked from Moscow Control Center. He says he hasn't had that much time to look at the countries they passed over. The third question is for Vance Brown. Vance, for 3 days now, you have not heard any news. What kind of news would you like to hear from us journalists? Is for the commander of the Soyuz, Alexei Leonov. Where in your country would you plant the seeds of the trees which are to be exchanged between you? I would like to plant them near my home, because they're the most beautiful types of growth in Moscow. I would like to plant the seeds in all throughout the world, including my homeland. The next question is to Valery Kupatov. You have children. What would you wish for these children as well as all the children of the world? I would wish for all children of the world that the future would be peaceful, and that all the children would grow up in peace. I would like for all children to be happy, that they would breathe clean air, that they would do well in school, Thank you. The next question is for Tom Stafford.
And the comm line is starting to clear up a little bit now.
Thank you very much for that.
Capcom Carl Babcock back here at Mission Control as our communications line starting to clear up now.
One more question for Alexei Leonov. Could you transmit to Earth a sketch which shows the essence of the joint mission by the spacecraft? This would be very difficult to do this quickly. But I can send you this drawing. I can show you this drawing. Here is the drawing. It is of the Soviet flag and of the United States flag. Excellent. Thank you.
Alexei Leonov again with his quick wit, and of course he is a very well-known artist.
He says, I've done lots of sketches here. For instance, here is Tom Stafford, and he's showing a picture of Tom Stafford now. He looks very good, very healthy. I will show you. Here is another one of Tom. Excellent. There's another fellow from Texas. That's my friend. I had a portrait of Vance Brand, but I left it in the other compartment. These are sketches I've done while in space. Sure. Thank you very much, Alexei. Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you.
First question is for Tom Stafford.
Carl Babcock, Capcom here.
The operation of the Soyuz crew during the first days of the flight.
Well, evaluation of the Soviet crews during the first day of the flight has been very good. As you know, these are a lot of long, complicated, and very tedious procedures that we've had to go through in these transfers. A lot of interface that's taken a long time to work out. And things have gone very well. Yesterday we ran a little longer than we expected, but again, they had a lot of extra food for us to eat, and also the calls from the head of the Soviet Union and the President of the United States has laid us a little bit. But overall, the cooperation has been outstanding, and their procedures have been wonderful. Over.
Second question is for Valery Kubatov. How might your experiences on this mission contribute to the future hope for cooperation in space between USSR and USA? Did you learn anything in the last few days that would help future astronauts and cosmonauts? First of all, we found out that we could work together. Now we have put many things into practice, and it proved that in the period of docking, we were able to carry on all kinds of activity, and we were able to do so in complete understanding, and that's the main thing. That's what I would say, that we can act together, work together in space. And it will prove that the docking system works, and that all of the technical innovations have been checked out and proved and have been shown to work. The third thing, of course, we receive all kinds of additional experience on board the ship. And we receive much preparation for future flights.
The question was also directed to Vance Brand.
Next question is for Vance Brand. But before we ask that, we ask that Valeri Kabakta may move a little to his left and forward so we can see him better. The question for Vance is the same as the one that Valeri answered. How might your experiences on this mission contribute to future cooperation in space between the USSR and the USA? That is, did you learn anything in the last few days that would help future astronauts and cosmonauts?
Well, I think the greatest part of our learning goal has been in our training, which preceded this flight. And all things considered, I think there's where we learned how to communicate, how to plan our training, plan the various aspects of this flight. Upon getting up here in space, we did run into surprises, but only minor surprises as a result of our training. I think I've learned a lot. I think, of course, we had another joint flight someday that I'd find it much easier to approach, and if somebody else was on this flight, I'd have a lot of suggestions for them. And I'd certainly recommend such a thing, incidentally.
Thank you. Третий вопрос.
The third question
Алексею Леонову.
is for Alexei Leonov.
Насколько считаете вы комфортабельным корабль «Аполлон»? И как вам
How comfortable do you think the Apollo spacecraft is? And how do you like the American space food?
Я сегодня
Today I
пробыл на космическом корабле «Аполло». Это год.
have made the 60th orbit in the space.
Был на этом корабле. И как летчик, как космонавт, мне очень
We have had much training in this craft and have worked with the American astronauts.
маневренность, его
We've done our maneuvers,
корабль.
we've had complications.
Это довольно-таки надежный корабль, позволяющий решать много различных задач. И самое главное,
We have solved many main big problems.
поэтому он и посадка.
The main one problem in the future is the landing.
Сегодня
Today
я посмотрел его, как он выглядит в полете. Мне нравится.
I looked at the craft very closely during the flight. I had the opportunity for observation,
Большое количество иллюминаторов.
to see a great quantity of indicators and various things.
Сегодня в нашем полете я должен был делать репортаж.
Today on our flight I had to do reporting about the flight while I was in the Apollo.
Причина мне прошел по отсутствию связи. Вот. Но я скажу, что
I would say that
Земля выбрала.
the food
Была и здесь та же самая пища, и она мне очень понравилась.
I would have to say that we don't particularly care for the space food on the Apollo.
Вниманием экипажа. Но я еще раз скажу, что, конечно, космическая пища это не та пища,
I would also say that space food
сейчас люди на Земле. Но
is not like for people on the ground.
the best part of a good dinner is what you eat, but with whom you eat.
The best part of a good dinner is not what you eat, but with whom you eat.
Together with my very good friend Tom Stafford and the
Today I had dinner with my good friend Tom Stafford and Dick Slayton.
best part of my dinner.
Спасибо, Alexei. Thank you, Alexei.
The next question is for Dick Slayton. Now that you have finally made it into space, how do your experiences compare with all the stories the other astronauts have been telling you for years?
The 13-year wait was over.
14 years now, and I still didn't believe it until I got here myself. I don't think there's any way that the U.S. can express it properly. As I said earlier, I surely wish it was possible for a whole lot more people down there to come on up here, because I think it'd make for a much better world.
Thank you, Dick.
Следующий вопрос. Алексею Леонову. Какого рода космических полетах вы хотели бы еще участвовать?
What kind of space flight would you like to make in the future?
Я глубоко уверен, что все мы сейчас, и те, кто летает на космических кораблях,
I firmly believe that
смотрит на...
perhaps I will again find space.
являемся участниками только лишь начала большого
We are participants at the beginning
пространства.
of flight of significance called humanity.
Мне бы, конечно, хотелось еще побывать на каком-нибудь космическом корабле.
We, of course, would like to participate in some kind of space flight.
Земного шара, чтобы
We would like to visit new planets.
многообразный лик нашей Земли, ее разнообразные краски, запечатлить это в своей памяти до невиданных для людей. Ну и побывать на высотах больше, чем мы сейчас ходим. Там Земля выглядит совсем по-другому. Я думаю, что мы
I think that
и у нас есть еще запас.
we have only begun.
Мы все-таки поучаствуем в дальнейших космических полетах.
We have only begun space flight.
The next question is for General Stafford, same as the one Colonel Leonov just answered. What kind of mission would you two like to fly in space yourself?
Are you talking about the next mission? I would think, naturally, the background of flight tests, that you'd always like to fly a new and a better and a more modern device. And we have one coming along called the shuttle. I would certainly like to fly that, and I would hope that Alexei would have a vehicle developed by their country that we could fly, maybe in a joint mission. That would be my wish, since man's progress has always been a geometric progress. The benefits derived from science and technology has always helped all of mankind. I would hope that the next missions, if I do fly one, would be one, the more modern type of vehicle that could have more benefits for everybody. Но я еще вот согласен с Томом и хочу сказать, что одно дело корабль, но еще другое, это с кем ты летаешь. Так вот я бы хотел всегда в космос летать с друзьями, которым очень много доверяешь, и которые доверяют тебе, и с которыми просто не скучно работать.
He said he would also like to fly in a spacecraft, but spacecraft rather than a type.
Did you find talking to each other in the listener's native tongue a desirable way to communicate during the complicated rendezvous and docking missions?
Of course. This is very important.
Of course, it was necessary. Again, we developed this technique out of working together over a period of nearly a year. That was over a year and a half ago that we determined that if we would listen to the other person speak in your own tongue, the individual would speak slower, also more distinctly, and would make fewer mistakes. And so it worked out beautiful, as you saw in the rendezvous, and the end results you saw on television and what you're seeing now. It's also been a great experience for us as far as a way of communicating with each other. Over.
И последний вопрос Алексею Леонову.
Question to Leonov.
Насколько продемонстрированная в этом полете способность спасения экипажей важна для будущих космических полетов?
How important do you think that the flight will be in future missions?
Когда начали заниматься программой
We began to study in this program of the Soyuz
графу нашей программы ставили отработка средств спасения, отработка
for about means of rescue in space, docking and so forth.
мы можем сказать, что мы
Now we can't say that we
часть этой программы. Мы испытали стыковочные узлы, они
have
работали
been able to perfect the docking,
крепко. Это значит,
and it was able to be done very well.
по унифицированию следующих космических систем не
We will also work on the unification of future elements of future space flights,
корабли и корабли Соединенных Штатов
when all space flights from America
смысл
and the United States will be able to fly together.
развиваться в этом направлении, тоже иметь единые унифицированные стыковочные узлы для того, чтобы использовать любую возможность для оказания друг
We
другу
will be able to have, if we have the same kind of docking device,
в пространстве космическом.
it will be of great benefit in the exploration of space.
Приятно, что начало
It's pleasant for us
грандиозной человеческой работы в космосе положено сейчас, вот в это время,
to work in space for all mankind,
экипажами корабля Apollo и экипажем корабля Союз.
when the crew of Apollo and the crew of Soyuz have worked together in space for the benefit of all mankind. Thank you, Alexei.
Next question is Van Brandt. Now that Americans have been thrust into space on an international venture for the first time, what do you think the chances are for a joint manned exploration of a planet?
Well, I think frankly that the chances are very good, but I don't think it will happen right away. They say that, well, it would probably take at least 20 or 30 years before we would be ready as a world to go off and explore a planet. I think that's probably reasonable. The only thing in everything else that we've done in aviation, for example, we found that progress is always much faster than we expected. So perhaps the time will come when we will be thinking of exploring planets probably together within the next 20 years. I think that would be the way to do it. I think it would save time, effort, money. It would pool resources. It would, in other words, it would be interesting, and it would bring back benefits to the whole world.
Thank you, Van. The last question is for General Stafford, and it's the same as Colonel Leonov just answered, and that is, how important do you think the rescue capability demonstrated on this flight will be in future missions?
Well, as long as you have motion, you're going to have accidents. Needless to say that we do all our utmost, our efforts to minimize all the risk. However, after a long period of time, you could conceivably and possibly have some mishap that would require a rescue. The total system we have demonstrated here, the new docking device, the rendezvous system using techniques from both countries, communications procedures and techniques could be available in the future if required. Not on an instant notice, but it could be available. So I think we have taken a great step, that indeed we have opened a new era in the history of man on this, and it will be beneficial. Over.
Roger, time, thank you.
And that was the final question. And Harry, we've had another first on a mission of so many firsts. The first joint spaceflight mission, first joint news conference. Sorry about that communications in the first few minutes of the joint news conference, but that's been a problem that everyone has been experiencing since the two spacecraft have performed the rendezvous and docking maneuver.
To all children, so that their future would be a good one, so that their future would be a peaceful one, so that they would always live with their parents and in happiness, so that they would never lose their fathers and brothers as occurred during the last war.
Soviet cosmonaut Valery Kubasov.
This is Harry Walsh at the Johnson Spacecraft Center. At the present time, the Apollo commander Thomas Stafford and Soyuz commander Valery Alexei Leonov are in the Soyuz capsule at the present time, while astronauts Vance Brand and Deke Slayton, along with flight engineer Valery Kubasov, are still in the Apollo spacecraft. We expect to have the final transfer of the day later on when Deke Slayton accompanies flight engineer Kubasov back to the Soyuz. Then we will expect to have the final farewells of the astronauts. That should be coming up in the next couple of hours. This is Harry Walsh at the Johnson Spacecraft Center.
He is.
Between our countries. That's the after the flight. Today becomes reality. Thank you very much.
Tom Stafford giving greetings to the Russian people. The final transfers are just about completed now. Deke Slayton and Valery Kubasov are in the docking module, preparing to enter the Soyuz spacecraft. Vance Brand is in the Apollo command module. The final greetings will be given at about 3:30. We'll be back to report those with this first and what may be the last for many years to come meeting in space. This is David Crane with Harry Walsh at the Johnson Space Center. Harry Walsh at the Johnson Space Center, and aboard the Apollo-Soyuz spacecraft right now, preparations are underway for the final transfer. Tom Stafford and Deke Slayton will move through the docking module into the Apollo craft to seal the hatch for the final time. In the next few moments, we're going to have the farewell ceremonies that are to last between 5 to 7 minutes between Deke Slayton, Tom Stafford, Valery Kubasov, and Alexei Leonov. Deke Slayton is in the process right now of transferring several experiments back into the docking module that he will carry back into the Apollo command module with him on their return, including the now famous microorganism experiment, where they are taking cotton swabs and exchanging the germs is what it amounts to. Scientists in both countries most interested to see how their germs commingle.
Okay, now we're hooking up the TV cameras in the orbital module, the DM1 on the docking module.
Thank you for the report.
Tom Stafford and the crew well, right at the edge of the docking hatch now, hooking in the communications lines and the TV cameras. And Harry, I understand we just finally got an announcement not long ago from Moscow Mission Control.
An announcement, David?
Yes, I believe they were giving the time, temperature, and weather.
Yes, they were giving their weather report. They do that about every 15 minutes. They give very routine information about the orbit and the temperature and the pressure.
Tom Stafford speaking with...
Okay, DM2 power is on, and that's the power that goes into the orbital module one. So.
Roger, understand.
I'm sorry, it's DM1. DM1 goes into the orbital module now.
Understand.
It's rather interesting to view the monitors down here. You see so many things flying through the air, Harry. You kind of wonder if they remember everything, but I guess that's what they carry their checklists for. It's very easy. I think earlier in the day they'd spent about 15, 20 minutes looking for a pencil. Somebody dropped the pencil. Well, you don't drop anything. You just kind of lose it because it floats off somewhere.
Yes, earlier today also I heard Mission Control Moscow asking the cosmonauts where they had left the television cables and apparatus and so forth. I gather they had not really kept up with where their equipment was.
Which is understandable to some extent. The video that we have here on our screens, our monitors at the Johnson Space Center, giving an extremely clear view of inside the Soyuz spacecraft. From the docking. Somebody's elbow hit the wrong switch.
David, it's about Moscow time. It's about 11:35 now. That would mean in most of the Soviet Union it would be well past midnight when this broadcast is going on.
That was one of the things that they looked at in the time long times in between. One of the most difficult things to correspond correctly, particularly due with the TV passes that they wanted to do in the United States and in Russia, when at least the majority of the people would be up and moving about and have the opportunity to view this event. You know, it's been really quiet ever since the transfer yesterday has been deep late, and I think we finally heard him, we heard him during the news conference answer one question. Most of the time, though, he's floating around inside the command module, and when we were able to get video, we saw him when he appeared upside down.
Apollo Commander, we read you fine?
Okay, I'm hooked up back on the docking module audio.
Understand?
Running a little bit behind the pre-flight program this time. Tom Stafford, Deep Clayton are now near the hatch number 4 leading into the Soyuz spacecraft. They're still stowing various pieces of equipment back into the
command module.
Go ahead.
On panel number 10, we would like to check the VHF FM thumb wheel no higher than 3.
Okay, you're echoing, but understand on 9 and 10, the VHF.
Deke Slayton responding to command from ground control, and the crew is obviously running somewhat behind
Negative
time
on
their
panel
final farewells. We'll
Panel
break
10
the spot
only,
and be back in
VHF
just a
thumb
moment
wheel
or two.
on 3.
Okay, you're echoing badly, but I took that to mean on those two panels, VHF thumb wheel on FM on 3.
Negative only on 10.
Understood. Thank you.
Harry, I think this is, while we're waiting for the crew final farewells, I think this is the time to perhaps maybe look at
And the S-band
mission
thumb
as
wheel
it was
all the way
described,
decreased.
as we understand, maybe 3 years ago, when it was not originally described as this sort of a mission at all.
Decrease.
No, the original mission envisaged a rather different configuration altogether, David. As you know, originally the proposal was to have a joint docking between a Soyuz and an Apollo with a Salyut space station.
Got to this point that is now to the line of being the final crew transfer between the two spacecraft. Has gone extremely well. About the only major difficulty confronted by the crews has been a communications problem at times, but I think we've explained that, and it was something that could be expected and indeed did occur.
I believe, David, Glenn Lundy was speaking the other day, the flight director for this mission. He mentioned the fact that if they had one more ATS satellite or one more satellite like it, they would be able to provide continuous coverage and better coverage for communications on flights of this type.
The Apollo again so that we can turn on the TV and a DM.
Roger, you're all set. Yeah, they've been up for a while, Bo. They're pretty turned on.
Thank you.
The Deke speaks.
I take back everything I said. He spoke very well.
Have a good picture.
There is Clayton half in and half out of the docking module.
I think you should tell our radio audience which half is in and which half is out, David.
I will never forgive you for that one, Harry. Whatever we see, Deke, on our screens down. Particular position. Stafford is now moving the hatch to the side. One of the experiments.
David, do you know whether the farewell speeches or statements have been prepared in advance? Or do you know which languages they will be spoken?
We have not been told what languages they will be spoken in, and we have not been told, given any warning of what is going to be said, other than that the crew was to think about what they wanted to say at their farewell speech and make them themselves. At times, Harry, I've gotten the feeling that several of the remarks made by the cosmonauts might have been prepared, but I would say the majority of the remarks that they have made have not. They really did not prepare themselves for.
No, most of them I think been off the cuff. There were some things, obviously, when Valery Kubasov was introducing the audience, the television audience, to the inside and workings of the Soyuz spacecraft. He was working from a list, presumably a list of topics to show, and he was working from that.
I was reading through the Russian press kit not long ago, a 204-page document, and they give a fascinating account of the food on board Soyuz in extremely descriptive language. It translates out to just a magnificent display of great verbs and adjectives.
Dr. Module, that's David?
Yeah, he prefers to call it, since he was named the docking pilot, he likes to call himself the sewer pipe pilot. The docking module is nothing really more than an airlock, and since time was not a critical factor, or weight or anything else, they went ahead and threw in all kinds of experiments, devices, cables, whatever they could up to it. Still moving very slowly to the hatch.
David, is there some difficulty with the hatches, or is this...
No, there's no problem there. It's just taken a lot longer to transfer the various materials, the experiments they did have, and indeed there was considerable. Don't forget the micro, your favorite dish, a fungus in the peanut.
No, the space-forming fungus?
Yeah, space-forming fungus, and they took up 2 petri dishes each of this fungus to let grow in each of the 2 spacecraft, and they've exchanged 1 dish of that each to see how it responded in the different atmospheres of the spacecraft.
I believe, David, after the hatches are sealed, then the pressurization of the craft will go back to the way it was. Is that not correct? The 14.7 pounds per square inch in the Soyuz and the 5 pounds in the Apollo.
Soyuz will indeed go back to the 14.7, and again, the sole purpose for the airlock was to equalize the pressure and the atmospheres, the Apollo command module.
Have there been any indications that the differences in the cabin pressures in the various modules within the 2 connected spaceships causing any kind of difficulties or
None whatsoever.
I believe I heard Tom Stafford speaking a bit of Russian there. He said it's time to close the 4th hatch.
And the 4th hatch is the hatch leading into the Soyuz spacecraft. And he will soon be saying goodbye to Alexei Leonov, and Valery Kubasov.
CBS News. A national railroad strike averted. I'm Douglas Edwards reporting on the CBS radio network. And Convivial Day in space. And at CBS News Space Headquarters in New York, Reed Collins has details.
The visitation in space is ending now. The Americans are moving back into the Apollo. Leonov and Kubasov are back inside the Soyuz, and their hatch to the docking module was closed 2 minutes, 15 seconds ago. Tomorrow, after a sleep and eat period, they'll undock the spacecraft, and then they will redock. In each case, the Apollo will do the flying, although the Soyuz will activate the docking mechanism on its nose to see if it does the same thing that the one on the Apollo did during the original docking on Thursday. The Soyuz does not carry the fuel required for all of these flight maneuvers. Throughout the day, each side has had high compliments for the other. Tomorrow we'll see the final farewells when they undock the last time, and Soyuz prepares to return to Earth on Monday. The Reed Collins, CBS News Space Headquarters in New York.
Astronauts Tom Stafford and Dean Clayton are now back in the docking module. The hatch to the Soyuz spacecraft has been closed for the fourth and final time. That completes the crew transfer activities. The big expected farewell ceremony of the crewmen did not take place as expected. As a matter of fact, Harry, it was very brief, and I think you picked up the only comment, and that was made by Tom Stafford.
The only thing he said was he wished the cosmonauts success, and that was all he said before shaking hands and coming back through into the docking module.
There's a lot to be done yet. They have still got actually 2 more hours of docking module time as they bestow various experiments, books, and bring them out of the docking module, stow them in the Apollo command module. And the wish you success for the rest of the mission is going to be just a couple of days from over for the cosmonauts. They are scheduled for a touchdown at 5:51 Monday morning. 5:51 Monday morning touchdown for the cosmonauts, and will be up until next Thursday. Everything seemed to go extremely well, though. There were a couple minor problems during the transfers. Tom Stafford had indicated that it was a lot of time and trouble getting through the airlock, but there were really no basic problems. Everything went off relatively well. All of the experiments were conducted, and the results, of course, of those won't be known until they are returned here to Earth. This is David Crane with Harry Walsh at the Johnson Space Center.
This is The World Tonight. Good evening. I'm Douglas Edwards, CBS News. Astronauts and the Soyuz cosmonauts have been holding open house for each other today, and the detente has been thick enough to cut. There was a joint news conference, and later Tom Stafford spoke in Russian to the Soviet people, while an interpreter translated it for us into English.
Dear Soviet television viewers, allow me, as the representative of the United States of America, to transmit to you best regards from the people of the United States. I'm sure, dear television viewers, that this flight will open the way to further cooperation and friendship between our two countries. Thank you and good luck.
In another message, Stafford said the historic flight of the Apollo and the Soyuz opens a new era in the history of man, a thought echoed, in other words, by the Russians. More on the flight now from Reed Collins in the CBS News Space Headquarters in New York.
Late in the day, the hatches were closed for the last time. Each crew in its respective spacecraft began some housekeeping, hoping for some solid sleep before the busy leave-taking tomorrow. There will be a practice undocking then. The Apollo will pulse out about 200 feet, providing Soyuz an artificial eclipse of the sun for photography. Then back the Apollo will come for yet another docking. This time the Soyuz docking pedals will be extended, and they will draw the craft together again, though all of the flying will be done by the Apollo craft with its luxury of propulsive power. The final undocking will take place
and after an intricate maneuver around Soyuz, Apollo will pulse away. Soyuz will deorbit on Monday and land in Central Asia. Apollo will fly on and return to the Pacific Ocean July the 24th. Tonight, with the final closure of hatch number 4, the men of Apollo and Soyuz met face-to-face for the last time until they shake hands once more on Earth. This is Reed Collins, CBS News, Space Headquarters, New York. CBS News, Space Headquarters in New York. It was a day of transfers, visitations through the docking module that provided each man with a view of the other spacecraft and the opportunity to send messages to the host country. There was a broadcast news conference in which questions were screened in advance and beamed up from Moscow and Houston. Colonel Alexei Leonov deftly turned a discussion of food into a tasteful evaluation of company.
Best part of a good dinner is not what you eat, but with whom you eat. Today I have dinner together with my very good friend Tom Stafford and Dick Slayton, because it was best part of my dinner.
The designers and makers of the Apollo spacecraft, flying in its last mission, must have flushed with pride when Leonov was asked to assess the Apollo ship.
As a pilot, as a cosmonaut, I like this spacecraft very much. Its appearance, its maneuverability, its capabilities. But of course, the Apollo has proven itself already that it's a reliable spacecraft, which makes it possible to accomplish many difficult missions. And even the most difficult mission, which involves flying around the moon and even partially a landing mission.
In Moscow, the wives of the cosmonauts, usually deep in the gray background of Soviet womanhood, were brought forth and interviewed. Correspondent Steve Young asked Mrs. Lyudmila Kubasov about the role of women in space.
In the future, if there is a necessity to send a woman with a crew into orbit, I think that in that case, the crews should be families in order to avoid conflict and problems.
Mrs. Kubasov, would you like to see one of your daughters become your daughter become a cosmonaut?
I don't want her to be a cosmonaut.
Why?
Почему? First of all, it's a very difficult life. It's a very dangerous life. And third, I see this profession very close up, and I would not wish it for my daughter.
Mrs. Lyudmila Kubasov, who didn't raise her girl to be a spacenik. Today, even the males found the workload plenty up there. At one point, the Soyuz cosmonauts told Moscow they wished they had more than the 5 hours or so sleep allotted before tomorrow's final day of joint flight. Then the Apollo will de-dock from Soyuz, fly out some 200 feet, and come back and dock once more. This time, the Soyuz docking pedals will be extended in their first test as the active system, although Apollo will do all the flying and the actual maneuvering. If there is one disappointment in the flight, it has been the quality of communication at times. NASA blames interference in Los Angeles for that. Transmissions that nearly spoiled the last goodbyes or dos vidanias as the hatches were closing for the final time late today.
We wish you the best of success. I'm sure that we've opened up a new era in the history of man.
Soyuz returns to Central Asia Monday. Apollo flies on until July 24th. This has been continuing coverage of Apollo-Soyuz, a meeting in space. I am Reed Collins, CBS News Space Headquarters in New York.
News a service of on the hour from American Information Radio. This is Charles Webster, and at this hour, a threat answers now that joined them as one team in space and are now preparing for tomorrow's separation. This afternoon, Commander Stafford of Apollo and Leonov of Soyuz exchanged gifts and documents commemorating the historic meeting in orbit. The joint space venture has been special in more than one sense for foreign newsmen in Moscow. Details from ABC correspondent Ernest Weatherall at the Soyuz News Center in Moscow.
The visit of 700 foreign newsmen here may set the Soviet space program back at least 10 years. Never in the history of the program have so many foreign newsmen picked, probed, and demanded information. And except in a few cases where they hedged, the Soviet space officials answered all questions. ABC technicians who are working the TV pool for the American networks highly praised the Soviets for their handling of satellite feeds to the United States. There were some foul-ups, of course, but most occurred beyond the Soviet Union. TASS even came up with some bright news for reporters, such as the one about twins born in Central Asia whose parents named them, you guessed it, Soyuz and Apollo. Ernest Weatherall, ABC News at the Soyuz News Center, Moscow.
Moderate demonstrators and their communist opponents were in the streets in Portugal as the military regime met to prevent a confrontation. I'm Jerry Landay reporting on the CBS radio network. The Apollo have ended their flight as a joint team, trading pine seeds to be planted as a living memorial to the mission, creating a new alloy of lead and gold in the weightlessness of space, and fusing halves of a commemorative disc, marking completion of the mission. The space vehicles separate tomorrow.
CBS News. The U.S. Postal Service has worked out a contingency plan to move the mail in the event of a nationwide strike on Monday. This is Doug Poling reporting on the CBS radio network. The spacemen have ended their joint experiments. Both crews are back in their respective ships. The spacecraft are still flying in tandem, but will separate tomorrow, preparing for the return to Earth. For about 26 hours, the 3 Americans and the 2 Russians worked as one crew, working, eating, and exchanging mementos. Now,
The Hour on the Hour from American Information Radio. This is Don Fisher, and at this hour, the joint space mission is about over. The 2 spacecraft will undock in the morning, ending a 2-day visit in space. The astronauts and cosmonauts held a final use conference Friday afternoon, and then after a final handshake, sealed the tunnel linking the 2 craft.
CBS News. Apollo and Soyuz, still linked in space, are getting ready for a brief period of separation, and then a brief period when they'll again be joined, and then final goodbyes. I'm Christopher Glenn, reporting on the CBS radio network. The undocking will come just about an hour from now. A little while ago, the actual time of the maneuver was changed a small bit. In Houston, Flight Director Don Putty explained why.
Undocking because of a change in the orbit and small change in sunrise time has been delayed by 1 minute and 15 seconds. The reason that's critical, of course, is to make sure that we get in the proper attitude at the proper time for the joint solar eclipse experiment.
That experiment will find the Apollo maneuvering to produce an artificial eclipse of the sun so the Soyuz crewmen can photograph the effect. The purpose of the brief redocking, then, is to allow the Soyuz crew a chance to play an active role in a rendezvous procedure. Apollo had the main part in the initial docking on Thursday. Final undocking occurs a few hours later. The news continues after this.
Good morning. This is Neil Strasser with the CBS World News Roundup.
Apollo and the cosmonauts of Soyuz are in the midst of a rather lengthy process of farewell this morning. We hear the latest from Reed Collins at CBS News Space Headquarters in New York.
A trial separation is underway between the Apollo and Soyuz right now. With the craft over South America and coming into daylight, the Apollo is to unlatch from Soyuz and pulse out some 200 feet in a direct line with the sun. The Soyuz will use the Apollo's cylindrical form as an occulting disk with which to eclipse the sun. The cameras aboard Soyuz will then photograph the solar corona.
Social Security check for the use the fair odds for
Counted in the concept, the Soviet suggestion is now being tried out. Within a half hour, the craft should be joined together again. The Apollo will pulse back toward the Soyuz, This time, the docking pedals aboard Soyuz will be called upon to achieve the docking. They will be extended, clasp the pedals of Apollo, draw the spacecraft into the hard docked position. That is the plan which, according to the clock, is being followed now. NASA and Moscow are confident enough of the idea to have it done out of contact with the ground. It's being videotaped aboard the spacecraft for replays later. Undocking finally takes place later in the day. This is Reed Collins, CBS News, Space Headquarters in New York.
Time, Richard Roth has been reading the newspaper reaction to the Apollo-Soyuz mission.
The crew of the orbiting space laboratory Soyuz sends its greetings to the men of Apollo-Soyuz. So does a kolkhoznik, a collective farm worker from one of the larger state farms near Moscow, who told Soviet broadcast audiences today that while the farm workers have been busy bringing in the harvest, they've also taken some time out to follow the space mission. The farmer says the international space venture is good for détente and says it confirms the correctness of the Communist Party program. It's all official hearts and flowers for the crews of Apollo-Soyuz today, the newspapers front-paging pictures of the cosmonauts and astronauts in joint flight. But typical of most Saturdays in Moscow, the streets are filled with shoppers taking advantage of the season. There are lines of people waiting at street corner stands, and the central market is jammed. Fresh fruits and vegetables are in abundance now, and the tempo of life here seems to revolve around the mundane. Richard Roth, CBS News, Moscow.
Speaking of the Soviet harvest, 4 U.S. Agriculture Department experts are on the way to the Soviet Union for on-site checks on the extent of the Russian crop failures.
A successful undocking was completed just about 7 minutes ago. Viewing the picture on our screens here at the Johnson Space Center, we now see the Soyuz spaceship beginning its rendezvous proceedings to dock again to use its docking mechanism in an active mode to test it out. Harry, I believe we're picking up some comments from Soyuz Commander.
Just descriptions of the distance between the craft and the orientation and procedures coming up. They look to be about 50 meters away at the present time. The Soyuz seems to be closing very gradually on the Apollo.
Again, this is a test. This is a test of the Soyuz docking mechanism. The Apollo spacecraft will remain passive in this situation. The comments you hear in the background, you may be hearing Stafford speaking Russian to Alexei Leonov, the Soyuz commander. You may hear Leonov speaking English to Stafford as they are now preparing the rendezvous. They're also taking a series of pictures during this particular maneuver with the Apollo acting as a solar disk. In other words, blotting out the center of the sun while the Soyuz craft takes pictures of the solar corona. These pictures to be exchanged shortly after the mission. And the Soyuz craft now still maneuvering, putting itself into the proper angle. Those comments from Stafford attempting to raise Leonov, saying, "We see you. You are looking good." Now over the Atlantic Ocean, they have passed over South America. Harry, that's quite a sight that we can view here.
Pictures. I think we're looking at the orbital module, the front of the Soyuz. That's Moscow trying to raise the Soyuz.
Still haven't gotten a go for the docking maneuver. The spacecraft are not that far apart at the moment. That is Stafford speaking with
That is just commentary from Moscow
is for the meals, and the time is for the television and reporting.
And it appears as if the Apollo craft now is in the proper angle to act as the solar disk, and the Soyuz craft should be in the next few moments taking its pictures of the solar corona. Then about 5 minutes after that, they will continue their this time. The Soyuz craft will attempt to do a docking there. We'll be back with the details of that shortly. This is David Crane with Harry Walsh at the Johnson Space Center. Soyuz spacecraft has performed well in its docking procedure with the Apollo. I'm David Crane with Harry Walsh at the Johnson Space Center. Details in just a moment. The Soyuz spacecraft has performed well, Harry, and I imagine this is going to be quite a boost in morale for the Russian technologists.
I think so, David. No one really expected anything to go badly on the redocking, but everything went very smoothly indeed. Very spectacular. We had excellent pictures on the monitors, and it took place approximately between South America and Italy, didn't it?
Somewhere between South America and Italy, and the commander, Alexei Leonov, maneuvered the Soyuz very gently, very easily, and as a matter of fact, it appeared to be, at least on our monitors here, a much softer docking than the Apollo performed with the Soyuz some 2 days ago.
That's true. There was no collision this time.
The docking mechanism on the Soyuz spacecraft is somewhat different than the docking mechanism on the Apollo. The Russian spacecraft uses an electrical docking mechanism. It serves the same purpose, almost identical in many respects, though, to the Apollo docking mechanism, except it is electrical, while the Apollo spacecraft is a hydraulic-type mechanism. And currently, Harry, I believe we just heard from USSR commentary that they were checking out the docking module again to see if it's holding its pressure. And
that's right. The procedure, David, is for the cosmonauts to stay in the descent apparatus of the Soyuz until the integrity check on the seals of the hatches between the orbital module of Soyuz and the docking module are carried out. When it is secure, then they will open the hatch between the descent apparatus and the orbital module and go into the orbital module to check out all the systems in there.
Again, all continues to go well on the Apollo-Soyuz test project, the historic meeting in space. This is David Crane with Harry Walsh at the Johnson Space Center.
News of the hour on the hour from American Information Radio. This is George Engel, and at this hour, word the Soyuz are back together again after a brief separation in space. Details from correspondent Vic Ratner at the Apollo-Soyuz News Center.
After undocking, Apollo backed off, blocked out the sun for Soyuz to take eclipse pictures, and Tom Stafford edged in again to link up with a waiting Alexei Leonov.
We have capture. Now in the process of closing the latches. We did the solar eclipse experiment. Everything following the program.
Clear skies on Earth enabled Vance Brand to report seeing the pyramids of Egypt from 140 miles in space. Vic Ratner, ABC News, Apollo-Soyuz News Center.
CBS News. It looks as if the mail will go through after all on Monday morning. Good morning. I'm Neil Strasser reporting on the CBS Radio Network. Extended farewell, the American Apollo and Russian Soyuz spaceships have undocked and redocked this morning, this time with the Russians doing the docking maneuvering. More from Reed Collins at CBS News Space Headquarters in New York.
Over the tip of South America, the latches released Apollo and Soyuz, and Apollo pulsed outward in a direct line with the sun. The objective was to provide Soyuz an artificial eclipse of the sun with the round cylinder of the Apollo spacecraft. Out 50 meters, about 164 feet, the Apollo stabilized and kept its distance as the craft approached full daylight in Africa. The maneuver used slightly more fuel than anticipated. Whether Soyuz accomplished the objective of getting photographs of the solar corona won't be known until the films are developed back home. The Apollo pulsed back to the Soyuz, which had extended its own petals. The spacecraft touched, the Soyuz system drew the craft back to a solid dock. In an hour and a half, the craft will separate their final time. Apollo to fly a slow dance about Soyuz in another experiment using both spacecraft. Then they will drift away, Soyuz to land in the Soviet Union Monday, Apollo flying on another 5 days before it splashed down in the Pacific. Reed Collins, CBS News, Space Headquarters, New York.
Clock. CBS News. Apollo and Soyuz are about to come to the parting of the ways. Their final undocking is due in about 25 minutes after a morning of maneuvering in space. I'm Christopher Glenn, reporting on the CBS radio network. Earlier, the spacecraft had separated, and the Apollo served as a kind of shield to create an artificial eclipse of the sun, which the Soviet crew could then photograph. Then they redocked so that the Soviet crew could get some practice at being...
Over. Apollo Houston? Go ahead. That sounded like it was from far western Oklahoma around Kiev.
Some light moments before farewell to the joint portion of the mission. Reed Collins, CBS News, Space Headquarters, New York. Because it involves an experiment in which both spacecraft are required, the Soyuz has some reflecting mirrors on it, and the Apollo is going to do a long, sort of insect-like mating dance around Soyuz, and this will transmit light to the Soyuz, be reflected back and measured, whereby the learned scientists hope to find out more about the presence of some neutral atoms of oxygen and nitrogen up there. They call this the MAO-59 experiment in the books.
Apollo Houston, we have a good TV picture.
Mission Control now can see what's happening. All of this being transmitted down through that ATS-6 satellite, the one that used to be used in this country to educate people in remote portions of Appalachia. Was used also over Alaska for some remote medical sensing work and some nursing jobs. Now it's over Kenya, where it's intended to aid the teeming multitudes of India and other portions of the world with its marvelous capability to retransmit, rebroadcast television pictures or any sort of communication. We don't hear very much communication right now that's too sensible, however, because of this continuing interference, which has probably been the only minus of the entire flight thus far. We can hear Stafford talking to
Roger.
And that's a Roger Vasconia, but what he's rogering, nobody knows. They did this once before, but this is the parting for good after the trial separation early today, in which the Soyuz performed the experiment, really with the Apollo drifting out away from it, blocking its view of the sun. The Soyuz then took photographs of the solar corona. And this was the Soviet-inspired experiment using the active Apollo once again. Tom Stafford is chattering in the background to his companions aboard Soyuz, and also being picked up by Mission Control in Houston. In a few minutes, there's nothing really terribly time-critical about this, as there was earlier in the de-docking. The Soyuz wanted to use the Apollo as its occulting disk of the sun, took the pictures under the agreement that the United States has with the Soviet Union. In 1 year's time, we can request some copies of those negatives if we are interested, and under the agreement they are to provide them after 1 year. Spacecraft still joined together, as they have been for the apex of this most dramatic flight. They got 164 feet apart this morning during their first little trial separation, and then they docked again. I believe now they're about to pull away. Deke Slayton, by the way, performed the redocking exercise today, and it's his job to do the big fly-arounds and the very intricate formation flying that this experiment
requires. The internal camera is getting reflections from the window. Can you move it down a little so we won't see the sun?
Houston Mission Control, concerned, of course, about the image that they get on their screen. A little camera directing work.
Apollo Houston, if CX-03 is empty, you can use CX-04.
I believe that's Carol Bobko, the CATCOM or capsule communicator, as they call it. Still waiting for the official undocking. It will be some time, really until mid-afternoon Eastern time, that the total communication between the two spacecraft is erased. And that's at the end of one of these data-taking passes that Slayton will continue to perform with the active Apollo spacecraft, pointing it and its beam at the reflecting mirror system aboard Soyuz. There's a reason why regular spectroscopic technique doesn't work on neutral atoms of nitrogen and oxygen in near space, and the reason totally escapes me. I believe they are undocked.
Okay.
And the images begin to separate on the mission control screen in Houston, Texas. And we're going to see if our communication is a little bit better with our CBS News Space Headquarters in Moscow. My colleague, correspondent Steve Young, is there. Steve, is there any visible reaction from your standpoint?
Well, Reed, at the moment, the USSR Science Academy, which is providing us a video signal from their mission control where we're not allowed to go, is showing the same scene you've been describing in mission control in Houston, the two spacecraft slowly separating. I don't know whether you know, can hear rather, but there are loudspeakers around us, and just about 30 seconds ago they began to narrate the same event. It's a voice in Russian describing the slow now separation of Soyuz and Apollo.
But no visible reaction. I suppose the man of the street in Moscow has been following this. He's been getting all the coverage, I suppose, that he could absorb, hasn't he?
Yes, I think that Pravda was plastered with space news, has been for the last 4 or 5 days, and was almost entirely dominated by it yesterday. It began to reduce to about half of the front page this morning, and there have been many television broadcasts. But interestingly enough, right now I'm looking at Soviet television, and they are not carrying this event live. They carried the launch live for the first time ever in this country. They plan to carry the recovery operation Monday from Soviet Central Asia live. But right now, Soviet television is carrying a children's cartoon.
Well, that's Saturday for you. Steve, I don't know. I know it's been an experience for you and for the several Americans in the space program. With a few seconds left, have they had a tough job over there?
Well, they told me today, I met one of them at lunch, as I said, we can't get out to mission control where they are operating. The only time where they had very much to do at all was when there was that temporary problem with the probe before the two spacecraft had rendezvoused and docked, which looked for a time as if it might prevent the crew transfer. Only then they said that they have any work to do. Since then, it's been...
Steve, we've got to go. They're undocked. Everything's going fine in our continuing coverage of Apollo-Soyuz, the meeting in space. This is Reed Collins, CBS News Space Headquarters, New York.
O'clock and time for the news.
CBS News, the first meeting of two nations in space has ended. I'm Bernard Kalb reporting on the CBS radio network. On schedule, America's Apollo spaceship pulled away from Russia's Soyuz, undocking for the final time, concluding 2 days of adventure during which astronauts and cosmonauts shuttled between spaceships to conduct experiments, share meals, exchange gifts, and inaugurate the first chapter of détente in space. More on the final undocking from Reed Collins at CBS News Space Headquarters in New York.
The spacecraft separated for the last time some 35 minutes ago. Soyuz then opened some reflective panels, and Apollo began sending a beam and measuring the return reflection. It's a delicate experiment designed to detect oxygen and nitrogen atoms drifting up at that altitude of 137 miles. Deke Slayton is flying the formation maneuver, with Soyuz the passive target. Some 3 hours from now, this joint experimentation will end and the spacecraft will park for the final time. Soyuz returns to Earth on Monday. Apollo flies on, though, through the 24th of this month. This is Reed Collins, CBS News, Space Headquarters, New York.
More after this.